like to call the meeting to order and have the clerk lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. If I could have a motion and a second that the agenda of the January 24th, 2017 meeting be approved as submitted.
Second.
Questions, comments? All those in favor? Thank you. We also have a consent agenda consisting of approval of minutes, acceptance of recommendations from the Committee on Special Education, recommendations from the Committee on Preschool Special Ed, and recommendations from the Superintendent for personnel changes. If I could have a motion and second that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
All those in favor? Thank you. We have the Treasurer's Report that was in your packet for the month ending November 30th, 2016. If I could have a motion and a second that the Treasurer's Report, including the cash report, general fund cash report, general fund revenue status report, general fund budget status report, school lunch fund cash report, school lunch fund revenue and expense budget for the month ending November 30th, 2016 be approved.
So moved.
Any questions on that? Comments? All those in favor? Thank you. Okay, we do have a special report tonight, and we've got Mr. Scott Dreschler here. Dr. Putnam, would you like to introduce him?
Yeah, we'll have Mr. Scott Dreschler come up, our Director of Special Education and PPS, and he's going to run through sort of an overview of special education and everything else that he oversees here in Penfield. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for allowing me to come in and share some of the great things that are happening in the last year and a half. So I apologize in advance. There is a slide that I'm going to skip, I believe. It's a very complicated slide, but I'll talk about it. I'll overview it as well. But what I'd like to do is just kind of pinpoint 6 or 7 main topics of the last year and a half, and celebrate is what I like to do, a lot of the great things that are happening so far. So I'm going to touch on some graduation options that the district has kind of gone with the state regulations. They've changed over the last 3 years a lot. Special education continuum of service, explain a little bit how we've been working towards solidifying that. Some forums and such that we've done with the Committee on Special Education to build consistency. The social emotional wellness, students with disabilities and ENL learners, there is a change in regulations as well for students that come into the district. And then we've tweaked some of our speech and language services to build some consistency across 6 buildings as well. So again, thanks for the opportunity. So as far as graduation options go, and this in itself could probably be about a 45-minute presentation, but as far as a Regents diploma, there are 5 Regents exams that you need to pass in order to obtain a Regents diploma. That's 1 in ELA, 1 in math, 1 in science, 1 in social studies, and 1 in an additional core subject as well. And then there's the 4+1, which is that extra core Regents, or there are some CTE accredited hours that allow you to also obtain a Regents diploma. The local diploma is offered for students with disabilities, and you can get that through a couple options: the low pass with appeal, the compensatory safety net, and then new this last June of 2016 was the superintendent's determination. And then there are also some exit credentials that are available for students, and that's the Career Development and Occupational Studies, which is the CDOS, and the Skills and Achievement credential. And that's a very quick overview, because that in itself could be about 45 minutes. We work very closely with Dr. Leslie Maloney and the counseling staff at the high school, as well as the middle school staff, to make sure all students are made aware. Currently this week, the counselors are meeting with the 8th grade teams to talk about course selection and things of that sort, and they're already planting a seed in 8th grade, which is great. The special education continuum of service, what we were able to do last year with the help of Rick Borman and Joe Kruger and Chris Brown and all the special education staff across the 6 buildings is put on paper the services that Penfield has been able to provide before I even came. It helps solidify what each level of service is, and it starts from least restrictive all the way to most restrictive. And it talks again with our related services like our speech and language services and occupational therapy services. And then there's consultation services that could be offered for support for school personnel on behalf of the student. And then as you go farther is the more restrictive part of that continuum of service. You get into the consultant teacher services, which can be delivered in the classroom for the most part. And then your resource room services, which are delivered in a small group in a pull-out model, most likely. Our adaptive physical education is for students with disabilities that are not able to participate with their gen ed peers in physical education class. And then we have a whole continuum of our special class options. I've been able to put on paper some language that helps clarify what our special class continuum looks like, kindergarten through 12th grade. There's 2 pathways that we could kind of decide that we're going on. The first pathway, we've been able to work with the Office of Humanities and the STEAM office, Kristen Williamson and the TOSAs, Denise Lemke and Kim Crystal, and Nicole Whitehead, and of course Jim Pfeiffer. And they have been able to, for one of our K through 12 special classes, we have a grade level we have 1 class at each grade level, kindergarten through 12th grade, and there's a ratio of 12 students kindergarten through 2nd grade, 3rd grade through 5th grade, it goes to a 15-to-1 option, and then from 6th grade on through 12th grade, it goes back to a 12-1-1. And those 12 students, 1 teacher, 1 teacher's assistant ratio can be tweaked depending on the needs of the student. We may add additional TA support based on the needs of the student. But the special classes there's 2 pathways. So one of the special classes, which has been referred to as our plus classrooms, it's the general education curriculum is adapted and modified to meet the individual needs of students that are really based on that student's IEP. The other pathway is the curriculum instruction is scaffolded and aligned to the grade level equivalent Common Core learning standards to associate that rigor again with that. It's a regents so that we're pushing the regents and making sure that students are being pushed to their ability levels is what we're doing. In the work of the humanities department and the STEAM department, what we've been able to do is we've been able to, through Kristen and Nicole, is back map starting with the STEAM and the math 9th grade algebra. We found that exam is a gateway exam, if you will, in that students, if they can pass that exam, they've been able to obtain a Regents diploma more likely. And the same thing with the Regents English 11. We've been able to take the essential skills that are associated with the English 11 and the Algebra 9 and back map it all the way through kindergarten. So those special classrooms starting in kindergarten, no longer is that teacher, that's teaching our most vulnerable students with the differing learning ability levels. We have narrowed that curriculum to those essential targeted skills so that they can then build on each year so that they're more likely to be able to do well when they get to that 9th grade year. So again, thanks to the Department of Humanities, and I mean, they've done a lot of great work, and we're still rolling out some of the humanities side of that, but it was, again, working with the teachers and gaining their feedback to make sure it was something that they would be able to implement within their classrooms. The Committee on Special Education, again, Rick Borman and Chris Brown and Joe Kruger do a great job chairing all of the meetings at the school age, and Mary Sapone, again, our CPSE chairperson, do a phenomenal job. When I came in, I was finding out that they do a great job, but some of the things that they're doing are inconsistent, kindergarten through 12th grade. And I wanted to be able to work with them to develop some consistent processes across K through 12 and again across 6 buildings. So working with them, we've been able to develop an IEP checklist, which is basically something that as teachers and administrative staff are going through the IEP and inputting data, that it's input consistently so that when we withdraw data from this system, which is called Frontline Direct now, that we're getting consistent withdrawal of information, that everything is matching the current programs and services that are being offered to our students. But then it also allows us on the internal process side of things is make sure that from a district office that my staff in my office has their eyes on this checklist to make sure that we are double checking and triple checking the input of data and make sure that decisions that are made at a CSE meeting are then routed in the correct place afterwards. If a service is added, we can double check that to make sure that the person that's going to supply that service is notified as well. So that's one of the things that we've been able to do. There's a CSE guideline book that we're putting together that hasn't yet been completed that'll help with teachers and again, chair people on the input of data so it builds consistency. The IEP dissemination log and 504 dissemination log is something that it's in the regulations, and I just wanted to make sure again that we're doing it in Penfield, and it's something that teachers or case managers that's one of the inconsistencies I've noticed. It's an IEP coordinator at the elementary and it's a case manager at the high school, and we're working on that. But that is it's a little form that says that every teacher that has a student with an IEP that they service and they're the manager of that student, they have walked around or they have had communication, whether it be through email, but they have notified each staff member that interacts with that child with an IEP of the necessary accommodations that they have, and it's a little sign-off sheet that they will then sign off on, and that case manager or IEP coordinator houses that sheet with them. And it just builds that collaborative nature at the beginning of the school year, and it just says that everybody's accountable for all students. With the whole student, something that I've tried to embrace is really looking at the Director of Special Education / Pupil Personnel Services Director. And with that, again, working closely with the counseling teams at all buildings. There was a mental health advisory committee that was developed 3 years ago, and it was kind of a grassroots. It was wanted by mental health providers, counselors, psychologists, social workers, a way to communicate with the Director of Special Education so that they were on the same page. Again, K-12 across 6 buildings. And that was a great thing that they had developed 3 years ago. When I came in last year, I had looked with Jim at the framework that was already established and some positions that were already allocated for an educational services rep. So we really worked with that advisory committee last year to look at the pros and cons of that committee and what they were doing well and some things that we can tweak. And we had decided on changing the framework of that mental health advisory committee and the name to an educational services committee. And that reflects that within the framework of the district, there's an educational services rep within each building, and that is one person that is either a psychologist, a social worker, or a counselor. So what we do is we meet monthly, and the communication from the building level, because those individuals also sit on a cabinet level team or a building level leadership team, they're able to gather information from their teams, their counselors, their social workers, psychologists within the building. They're able to bring it to the building level, but then in turn they're also able to bring it to me so that I can coordinate all efforts across 6 buildings, and then any information and work that we do within that committee can also be shared out consistently across the 6 buildings. And I have found the last meeting, we took a lot of last year again to reorganize, to listen, to figure out which direction we were going. We made the change for this year. And last year, or last month, I meet monthly with the committee now, was really eye-opening for me in that I also meet individually with a group of social workers across the district. I also meet individually with psychologists. I haven't been able to get all counselors together across the district. We were able to do it one time last year, but I'm able to hit different mental health support meetings in all buildings. And everything that was shared last month at this Educational Services Committee was everything, I had already heard it, which was great. So I mean, everything that we're doing to increase communication, make sure that all voices are heard, because it can be isolating out there as a mental health provider, as a social worker that's across buildings, or as a counselor that is within one room or a couple rooms of a building. So it really helped them to be able to, again, focus on that Board of Education goal that's promoting the development of the whole student. So that's one thing that we're continuing to work on. And then the continued focus of this year is working with the Mental Health Advisory Committee, in addition to the great work that Mary Beth Walker was able to do with writing a health curriculum. We're going to try to work this summer with the necessary people and teachers and whoever else would like, is writing a curriculum that would infuse both of them, so that all students, again, are accessing the same curriculum across all 6 buildings. And really to set us up for when they get to 9th grade, that they've all had access and the ability to grow socially, emotionally, consistently across the 4 and 5 elementary and middle school buildings. To shift a little bit to, there's a regulation, Part 154, and this specifically deals with students that enter our district, whether it be through transfer or in kindergarten, with an IEP, and this team would determine upon registration if the parent or guardian checks that there may be another language that was spoken at home. This team meets in a timely fashion within 10 days, and they then determine as a team if the child indeed may have a learning disability with the IEP, or if the child also has another situation going on with acquiring a new language, because they could get confused with if it's an actual disability or if the child may be misidentified and they have language acquisition needs. This team helps determine basically if the NICETEL test is given, and the NICETEL is the New York State Identification Test for English Language Learners. So it's a team, and I don't want to confuse, but it's a team that will get together, and this is coordinated by the SEA. So I was able to work with Rick Borman and Joe Kruger and Chris Brown, that when a child comes in with an IEP, and upon registration, there's a box that's checked that say there may be another language that's spoken. This team will get together to determine if that child will also receive, maybe in addition to IEP services, if they take this NICETEL examination. The NICETEL determines if you qualify for ENL services as well. And it also helps you determine, again, if it's language acquisition needs in addition to a disability. Another thing that was great work last year, I was able to work over the course of a year with all of our speech and language pathologists, K-12, and we got together over probably 5 or 6 times, and we were able to develop a mission statement at the beginning, because when you get everybody together that's so passionate about a particular field, it was great conversation. And it was some heated conversation, but it was great because we found out there were some inconsistencies that were being practiced, again, across our 6 buildings. So what we wanted to do is to develop a consistent mission statement, and that's the first thing that we did last year with all speech and language pathologists together. And that's on the board there. And then we took this mission statement and we went through the services that speech and language pathologists provide throughout the district, and that includes it's a little more cut and dry with services that are mandated per IEP and recommended through the CSE, but our speech improvement services that our district is able to offer is fantastic. And it's something that if you have some students that may have had students with siblings that may be in different buildings, and one sibling receives speech improvement in this building, but another sibling doesn't receive it in this building, we wanted to create consistency so that if you qualify for speech improvement services, you qualify for speech improvement services. So we went through with them again and developed a criteria based on a certain, I mean, there's many different assessments that you could use, but we tried to focus on 4 to 6 of the assessments that we'd use and determine which criteria, and there's speech and language pathologists, there's their critical opinion that matters as well, and that's taken into consideration. But we were able to develop a criteria across all 6 buildings. So that was great work, and we continue to meet. We're meeting this Friday as well as a department to look at some future things as well. So that was kind of the last year and a half. I gave you a lot of information. I appreciate your time as well. It gives me an opportunity to kind of brag about the great things that we've been able to do as far as PPS and special education, and it's great to be able to have a staff across all the 6 buildings that is supportive and really is passionate about students. So thank you. So are there any questions?
Thank you, Scott. Board members, questions? Camille?
I have a question about the algebra test, but also
I just wanted to say that I remember beginning of this year, Nicole Whitehead describing the back mapping, and it was just a great example of the summer work that goes on. And I know when I went to see the various PTAs and at the buildings, I would explain that to parents, that was just a good concrete example of the kind of summer work that happens. I didn't realize it was for the algebra test. I forgot that detail, but it was probably for other things too. With the algebra test, you said it was a gateway at 9th grade. Are there additional opportunities? Can the kids, students still take it in 10th grade? Is it a flexible system where eventually they can pass that algebra test and still achieve the diploma? Or is there sort of a point where if they're not going to pass the algebra test, you have to look at some of the alternative graduation requirements?
Well, yeah, the alternative graduation requirements are always available, but I mean, it's one of those 5 exams includes a math exam, so it can be algebra. Algebra usually it's built on, it's scaffolded, one built on the other. I would have to check again with Dr. Maloney in the counseling office
Step
as
in
to
on
what
that.
exactly.
They have multiple opportunities.
Okay, it's not
kids
just
take it
ninth
in
grade.
We have a large constituent of students who take it as an accelerated option in 8th grade. Typically, students take it in 9th grade. However, we do have some extended options at the high school where they learn the course over a period of 2 years and would take it in 10th grade. And then there are many opportunities where they can take a
Okay.
Regents exam in January or in August after a summer school session and get some support as well. So there's many opportunities for those students to pass that exam. But our effort has been, let's see if we can get them ready for that first crack at it,
grade.
because then it also opens up their schedule. If they need to focus on one of these other options in order to still get a Regents diploma, they've got that math piece out of the way, and if that maybe is that child's stumbling block, they no longer have to worry about that.
Okay.
So they've done a great job, and even to add on that, one of the things that we did is we know we have this plan now for kids coming in, but just like when we implemented the Common Core, we know there are kids who are in 5th, 6th, 7th grade who this plan wasn't in place when they started, right? So they may have had some gaps. So we even went not just on the global level, but even to the individual student level in some cases, and developed a back map plan for a math learning plan for those students where Scott and Nicole sat down with their teacher and developed a plan going all the way back from algebra to where they are now, and even if they're behind grade level, to figure out a roadmap for the next 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is until they're in algebra, to try to best ensure their success the first time through with that exam. And then those plans were taken to the future teachers at the middle school, et cetera, to have them reviewed to make sure, is this viable for when the student reaches you? So it was really a great vertical team effort to help prepare kids for algebra, but they do get a few cracks at that
Okay, that's,
exam.
because I just remember that was a hallmark of our math program, that there were many opportunities. that
Still there.
Yeah, but
Carol?
Can you tell us a little bit more about the superintendent's determination with the local diploma and how often does that happen?
That came out last June. I don't have the numbers on how often, but because that was probably June 16th, I believe. But, Dr. Maloney and the counseling department there, when it does happen, if it happened, I don't have the numbers now. It's something that they have tweaked again within last November. That's something that they changed the process in which that would get started as well. It used to be something that could be initiated by the school. Now it's something that needs to be initiated by the parent. But then again, good communication leads to all of them knowing all those options anyways. But again, I think that's something that's going to be ironed out. I've met with Chris Brown and Dr. Maloney and Steph Dana about what that process looks like prior to hitting Dr. Putnam's office. They have, if there are students that are considering that, I'm most likely 100% sure that they're communicating that with them, but I don't have accurate numbers right now with me.
I can let you know that I think I reviewed 2, and one of the students ended up passing the test that they needed to pass at the last minute in order to not need that superintendent determination. And Scott's right, that came from New York State Education. I think it was like June 16th, so it surprised everybody. There were no sort of not surprised, but there wasn't a whole lot of criteria that came with it. And it sort of gave superintendents the ability to review and grant the diploma to a student. But the background is incredible, as Scott mentioned, with Steph Dana as the counseling department chair and Dr. Maloney working through Scott's office to sort of say, well, what is that criteria? Because they really have to prove that they've tried truly their best, that they put in the 100% effort, that the attendance is there, that they've done all work that was assigned to them. So it's really for students who absolutely struggle due to their disability, not for lack of trying or not arriving to class or not doing work that's been assigned. So,
Thank you.
yep. We'll hopefully know a little bit more this June, so if we still have that ability.
Mark?
Yeah, you had mentioned the Special Education Service, this Education Services Committee had been something else and it changed its name. Did its mission change? Is it still just targeted for special education, or is it a broader role now?
That role is broader. Last year, the focus of that committee was really to determine what the purpose of that committee will be moving forward. This year, we've decided to focus on coping and resiliency are the two main things that we're focusing on district-wide. What that looks like and the framework in which we're going to be able to roll that out is something that we actually meet tomorrow, that we're going to create a focus for the rest of this school year on how those two things, coping and resiliency, can be infused through the development of a curriculum K-12, but then also in looking at things, how we can bring people into that committee to review tools that we can assess students' wellness and social emotional health and when we should do that. So coping and resiliency are two overarching keys, but we're also using the 5 pillars that the district uses as well, and that maintains throughout all buildings. And again, it's really looking this year on how we're going to be able to bring all of the, what we found out last year is the resources, we have them, we have staffing, we need to figure out how we're going to incorporate both of those together so that we can, again, meet all the needs. But it's using the backbone of the 5 pillars and coping and resiliency as an area of focus.
And this is for all students?
Yes, all students, and that's the PPS side, so it would be the social emotional wellness of all students.
Great, thank you.
I think one of the things to note, and I think you brought up a great point, is that Scott sort of wears 2 hats. He's our Director of Special Education, but he's also our Director of Pupil Personnel Services, and so that encompasses all sort of our mental health team. So therefore, that's dealing with all students in our buildings with a disability, without a disability. And one of the pieces I think from the board to remember is that when we talk about a counselor at the elementary school, we're talking about one person in the building. So when you talk about the counseling staff at the high school and the middle school, they have people to turn to. There's more than one. At the elementary school, there's one psychologist, one part-time social worker, and one counselor. So this sort of committee and Scott sort of being at all those meetings prior to this, before Scott, they met really on their own. And so sort of the direction and the support wasn't always there, not for on purpose, but it was really they banded together, which is great. Scott sort of stepped in and provided some direction, and then a direct line of communication right to Scott, which goes right to Jim and I, right to district office for our conversations as well. But it really helps us support and create a team focus where, again, it's tough to be the lone counselor, the lone psychologist in an elementary building.
Barb?
Scott is a retired speech language pathologist who worked with multiple students throughout my career. I applaud this speech and language mission statement. That's
They
amazing.
did a great job.
Yes, and my question is, because I never had one at BOCES, so is Penfield the first school district to have a speech and language mission statement in Monroe County?
Great question. I don't know. We didn't use any districts as a model. I mean, this was developed by, they had developed one, I believe, a while back. So they brought that out. And the amount of discussion that went around this was fantastic. And to come to this result meant that, I mean,
I know. I can imagine
great.
there was a lot of, but anyway, please take back my congratulations, because I think that this is a wonderful statement, and it bodes very well for Penfield speech language people. So
Great.
thank you.
I will definitely relay the message.
Catherine?
So Mark just asked about the Educational Services Committee, which brought to light the focus on the coping and the resiliency and putting that into curriculum. I have been reading a lot about how students seem to be children, young adults, teens, people all through, K through 12 and beyond are having trouble with the resiliency piece especially, and coping. So I'm really pleased to hear about this, and I was curious if you can give me just a little overview of what you mean by putting it into the curriculum. Will this be like special assignments, book reports, like what do you have in mind when you say curriculum?
I wish I could take credit for coping and resiliency as well, but I can't because that was right from the mouths of the educational services and who they represent. But it's more of looking at the resources. We have a resource called Second Step at the elementary level. We have the resources there. It's something that's also at the middle school as well. What we're trying to do is to look at the framework in which those services are delivered and how they're delivered and who delivers them. Again, because we have mental health staff, but like Dr. Putnam mentioned, at the elementary level, that includes one counselor, a 0.5 or so social worker, and one psychologist. And when we rely solely on them to implement and deliver a curriculum, then it's really, you can't hold teachers accountable. So what it's going to really take is we're going to take a look through the Educational Services Committee as talking to staff that's within the classroom, kindergarten through 5th grade, on do you need time, do you need resources, do you need training, probably all of the above, and how that's going to be rolled out. But the coping and resiliency, again, is going to be in the backbone with the 5 pillars that the district has adopted. And that sometimes is displayed through the culture of every building, through the positive behavioral supports that are available through all 6 buildings. But it's really through that committee is getting information from the building level and how we can roll that out. But we're still working on that.
Okay, so that's fine that you're still working on it. I'm just thrilled that it's out there and it's a very conscientious approach to really, I think, a big problem that the kids are, not everybody, of course, but, that this age group seems to be having difficulties with. So, so thanks for that. I do appreciate it, and I'm really happy to hear it.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Those are great questions, everybody. And Scott, we appreciate, as board president, I talked to the other presidents around the county, and we're clearly recognized as a leader in this and in what we do. So that's a great feeling, and always have to remind our public and district residents about that we do a great job with it because they don't get a chance to see what the other districts do. So we appreciate your efforts in coming to let us know what's going on.
Thank you for the opportunity again. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Nice job, Scott.
Thanks.
Okay, this is our visitor speaking time, where time is provided within the agenda for residents to bring concerns and comments to the board. Comments should not be related to any particular individual or to the specifics of negotiations, since that's not proper for the board to discuss those issues in a public session. A request to speak comment form should be filled out prior to the start of this citizens' comment period and given to our district clerk. It is expected that speakers will limit their comments to 5 minutes or less. The board reserves the right to limit the total amount of time spent on a citizens' comment period based on the length of the agenda. And we also always encourage written communication to the Board of Education. So we do have one speaker signed up tonight, Mr. Fred Shippey, 75 Clearview Drive. Fred is recognized by all of us. Fred is our representative on Monroe #1 BOCES, and Fred's here to talk about a request to be renominated to Monroe #1 BOCES board. And Fred, if I didn't we see like a branding change on the BOCES name or something?
The logo was changed.
Yes, yeah.
That was done with help from some students, and there is a new sort of cubist logo change.
It seems to be a trend across the state, so I think it very much identifies, if any of you haven't seen it, it just is, I can't remember the specific words, but it really clearly identifies more of what BOCES does. So, welcome.
Thank you, John. You pretty much covered what I was going to say. I have
Thank you.
had the privilege and pleasure of representing Penfield on the BOCES 1 Board of Education for many years now, and this is my term is ending, and I would like to request to be renominated to that post. I'm not sure when our BOCES clerk will get out the information on the election. I suspect it's coming soon. So just sort of a heads up on that I would like to be renominated to the post. A couple of dates that you may not be aware of yet, they're still a little bit away. Our annual meeting where we discuss the administrative budget and the candidates will be April 4th. And unfortunately, this is a Tuesday, as it usually is, so it tends to conflict with your board meetings. The component district vote is due on April 18th. So again, that some of the information should be fed into BOCES. And you'll get information from the clerk on this, but just a little heads up. Are there any questions?
Well, I think we do have that on the agenda for our next meeting. Something's been received, right, from the BOCES?
No,
Not
not
yet, but
yet.
it usually comes,
Yeah.
well, you haven't been here to see that, but it usually comes in around this time,
I
so.
think by February 1st.
yes.
They have to be
Yeah.
announced.
Yes, and we're talking to Superintendent White, or Dr. Putnam, is for us to take a tour in the March-April timeframe, or some point, because, we want to get out there and see the main facility and the one in East Rochester.
Well, I think the real important thing is we always try to give you a chance to see some of your students doing things, and that really makes sort of a connection between what those figures on the budget and the actual students. And as I think Dan mentioned to Dr. Putnam, that we'd be glad to come by and talk to the board if you'd like also. So
Dan had reached out, and so, as I mentioned, you and Dan White are always welcome to come and address the board.
but I do certainly encourage you all to come on the tour. I know several of you have been on the tour, but things always change, and it's always nice to catch up on what's new. We have a space problem, and fortunately, as most places have, we have looking for alternate locations for classrooms. It didn't work into the Penfield, I guess, building schedule, unfortunately. But, we have more and more, the students we have are more needy, and so the class sizes are smaller, and it takes a lot of space. But I'm very pleased at the kind of results we get with our students, both in the special needs and the vocational training people.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing some of our students. I know Barb has been asking us for years to come to her former workplace, the Bird School in East Rochester. So we're going to try and see that, because that's 7th and 8th. Or,
Bird is K4 and 5, and then Morgan is the 6th, 7th, and 8th.
7th and 8th. So the Bird Morgan, we'll try and get over there. But any questions for Fred? Fred, you've been on the board for how long now?
Something like 20 years.
Probably like 21, because it's 3-year terms or
Well,
something.
I ended up entering on someone who resigned term.
Oh, okay, so maybe 20. And before that, Fred served 9 years on this Board of
Yes.
Education, if you didn't know
Doing
that.
I really feel that education is one of the most important things we can do for our children. And certainly we all recognize as board members, we really have an impact on the education of the children. It's an important, sometimes thankless thing, so it seems, but just seeing the graduation, seeing the students walk across the stage, and whether they're high school group or special education people with our graduations, some of the special education graduations really almost put tears in my eyes sometimes, just to see. I'll try to remind you in the spring when we come up, because if you get a chance to do some of those special education graduations, that they're really interesting.
Okay.
And they're-
Any questions for Fred at this point? All right, well, we appreciate your coming out and keeping us informed, and we'll look forward to the information to come to Sharon and the tour, and possibly having you and Dan White, the superintendent, come back and visit
Good.
us.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you. Okay, our student representative report, Claire.
Okay, thank you. It's nice to be here again. So during the last few weeks at Harris Hill, third grade students received dictionaries from the Penfield Rotary Club, and on the 11th, the beginning orchestra and junior band performed for a full house in the gym as part of the winter concert. A few days after, the Suzuki Strings from 1st grade to 3rd grade and string ensemble students performed in an amazing string concert. At Cobbles, a select number of students were recognized for showing caring, and students wrote superhero dreams inspired by Martin Luther King. At Indian Landing, the drama club actors and actresses performed the show Heroes of All Shapes and Sizes on the 13th, and students walked around the school in the 0-hour PE walk, which got their hearts pumping and offered an opportunity for the students to become more active in school. Also, the Prelude Orchestra and Beginning Band performed a fabulous show at the Indian Landing Beginners Concert. In Scribner, students attended the annual PTA Pancake Breakfast, to which 375 breakfasts were served, and it raised $1,550.25. 15 Penfield High School students have also gladly volunteered to support and mentor a few Scribner students. In Bay Trail, the FTC robotics team will advance to the state tournament next month, and 8th graders are beginning to choose classes for high school as their time as middle schoolers are coming to an end. At Penfield High School, 4 AP Language and Composition students were chosen to speak on ethics to the Rotary Club, and 2 of the 4 of this are to advance into the regional competition. There were also 3 showings of the I'm Not Racist, Am I? Filming screening, which presented on how our generation is going to confront racism. This past weekend, the PHS dance team also hosted their showcase in the PHS auditorium. And this week is also midterm week, and a few of our students, many of us have multiple tomorrow and also on Thursday. And also this week, recently, the portfolio students' artwork has been advertised around the school, and we can see a few in the library. And it was great just seeing students clump near the display cases, just looking at the artwork, because personally I really love art, and it's a great way to make our hallways more colorful. And in athletics, home games are now being live streamed so other students and parents can watch their Penfield athletes from home. And Section 5 wrestling teams will host dual matches, and all proceeds will go to the Camp Good Days and Special Times, an organization that supports those who have cancer and their family.
Oh, thank you. Any questions for Claire? Very thorough as usual. Barb?
Claire, live stream meaning on the website or on the cable?
I believe there's a cable, but when I was talking with Dr. Maloney, we noticed that there's also a link on the Penfield website. So it should be on the news page, and it should be right there.
Thank you.
Through Time Warner.
Yeah, this is, we were one of the first 3 to do this in the New York State Athletic Association across the state. So if you go into the gym where they're usually videotaping, there's a big device up there, and it's quite a...
Channel 26?
No, it would be on streaming, okay, and
So you have to watch it online.
you watch it online.
Like TimeWarnerCable.com or something?
I believe, I'm looking at Nancy, is the directions on our webpage? So
Yeah.
right on that'd be much easier than if you go to the webpage and read Nancy's directions to get on there. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a great advantage for us, and many of you may know, but the person that heads this up, who I've known for a number of years, is a Penfield resident, Steve Arvan, who had children in the schools, and I ran into Steve and thanked him because Mr. Shambo told me what he was doing, and it's just a great thing for us. So great that we're cooperative and able to put that out there. So, Carol, did you have a question? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Claire, and
you.
be sure and study, as much as you
Yeah.
can.
Actually, I hope it's okay, but I gave Claire the okay to go. She's got 2 midterm exams tomorrow, and one of them's an AP course.
Both of them are.
Both are AP
Yeah.
courses. So I think, as we talked about at the board, focusing on education would probably be good for you to go study and be prepared.
you so
The whole
much.
student. Yeah.
We'll look forward to the results of that when we see you next. So, thank you. Dr. Putnam?
So we have, for superintendent reports this evening, the standard student and staff honors, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Sansucci, who will be presenting the 2017-18 Program 1 budget review. And then I just want to talk through a couple of slides as an update on the 2018 Elementary Additions project, so I can just share with the community the 2 meetings we've had so far and what's to come. Donations. Mr. Richard Tetlow was kind enough to donate a beautiful drum to the high school music department. So a welcome donation, and an instrument will be enjoyed by many Penfield students for years to come. How do I pronounce that type of drum? Djembe. Djembe. Oh, thank you.
I would guess, Jim.
Okay, djembe drum. I'm glad I'm not the only one, but I am not a music player, but I'm fascinated by what our band does, so I'm sure it'll go to good use, and we appreciate that donation. Poetry selected for a book. I think this is really cool. Author Amy Vanderwater recently visited Indian Landing School, and while there, she read some poems that students had created in preparation for her visit using the first line of one of her own poems. Miss Vanderwater was so impressed with the poems written by third graders Leo Sarasoletti and Sarah Lemcharian that she is going to include them in her upcoming book. And the working title of that book is Poems Are Teachers, How Poetry Teaches Us to Write Well in All Genres. And I just think what a cool thing for a couple of third graders to get their poems published. Student story published, another published author here. PHS senior Noah Henwood had one of his short stories, Judgment Day, published in an online publication called Literary Stories, Short Story Fiction from Around the World. It was included in the Saturday Spotlight on January 21st. So again, some great literary programs we have here, our humanities program supporting our students. Athlete of the Week, congratulations to PHS wrestler Zach Brown, who was named Channel 10 Scholar Athlete of the Week for the week of January 17th, and very proud of him. He did a great job on his on-air interview. Claire mentioned the I'm Not Racist, Am I film that we showed 3 times here at the high school for staff, students, in the community. Just wanted to mention that we were able to show it in a new partnership. Obviously, one of the board goals is building partnerships. It's one of my own goals as superintendent, too, to make sure that we meet that as a district. We have connected with St. John Fisher College, specifically their Office of Multicultural Affairs and Diversity Programs. They are an incredible group of individuals, and since St. John Fisher is so close to Penfield, it sort of made sense. So Dr. Maloney and I have met with them a couple of times, and we asked if we could show the film there. They asked if we could facilitate, and yesterday afternoon, myself, Dr. Maloney, and I want to give them names, is Elsa Wheat, an elementary school teacher at Indian Landing, Kim Crystal, our TOSA for Humanities, Paul Birkby, librarian here at the high school, and Lynn Brooks, social studies teacher here at the high school, all took time out of their day to go over to St. John Fisher and facilitate that conversation after showing the documentary that was viewed by a number of students from a city charter school, 6th and 7th grade students, as well as faculty, students, some of them being our own Penfield graduates who now attend St. John Fisher College, which was really neat. And also the vice president of St. John Fisher College was in attendance and was very impressed with our teachers as facilitators. So just wanted to give the plug for that great partnership, as well as our teachers going out of their way to support such an important conversation. And the last thing, just before I go to the budget, is it's not on here in a slide, but I did send an email to the board, and more information will come out. It's on our webpage, and as we get a little closer, it'll be on social media. But Friday, our amazing girls volleyball team is going to be celebrated by, they won a national award. They're one of 10 volleyball teams across the country that was selected by I think it's the Air National Guard and Max Preps, and they are going to be given an award at the halftime of the girls basketball game. So encourage everybody in the community to come out for that. It's very exciting. And as well, the same organization had given Coach of the Year to our own Coach Solomon, Harris Hill PE teacher and girls volleyball coach. So a great event. Look for that on social media, and we hope to see everybody there. And I will turn it over to Dr. Sansu. Oh, unless there's questions. Or
Any questions? I know Camille and I went to one of the I'm Not Racist. Did we all go? Great. Okay. That was just outstanding. And I think anything we can do to work with other groups is tremendous. So I know the one that Camille and I went to, I think was the noon one.
For students, yeah.
Student, it was pretty well crowded, so, and I think the reception was really, really good. So, so I think that's another example of us being, you know, kind of in the forefront. I know the other school districts are now kind of catching up with that. I think there was 4 to start with that were involved.
It was really amazing, you know, sitting in the role of superintendent you don't always see school districts partnering for something to that level. You know, so the number of meetings that the superintendent of Pittsford, Fairport, West Irondequoit, and I had to sort of organize this, and it was always about partnering. Our press release that went out shared all of our dates. It's nice to see that. It's an important conversation, and then to have, you know, we are all a little competitive. You know, we're a little competitive with our athletic teams. We're a little competitive with our test scores. But to put that all away and really join together on an important cause, I think was really important. And you know, at the Penfield showing, we had teachers from those districts come because our date worked better for them. And at the Pittsford showing, we had Penfield staff attend that because it was a better time for them. So I think that was really, really powerful.
Great. Okay, thanks.
We just add on to that we are showing it one more time.
Oh yeah, we are. We wrestled the DVD, and we're going to show it one more time on Friday morning at 9 a.m. That's just for staff. Today, Friday is a superintendent's conference day. It's a half-day conference day for elementary teachers. It's a full-day conference day for our secondary teachers, Bay Trail and the high school. So we're able to show it in the morning. And therefore, we already have, as of this morning, 52 teachers signed up to come over. And on their conference day, when they really actually have a lot of time and to do a lot of their own classroom work, they are committing 3 hours to come over and watch the film, which I think is very, very interesting, and it's great. So that'll be our final showing. It's at Fairport this evening, and then it's at a couple other locations, not-for-profits in colleges after this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Dr. Sansucci.
Thank you. Tonight is the presentation of the Program 1 budget. That simply means for us that it's the first component of the instructional program. And towards that end, we always begin with a review of our district goals, those goals of academic achievement and excellence, partnerships, fiscal responsibility. We've been talking tonight a lot about all 3 of these things, really. So we've heard a presentation about academic achievement, certainly about partnerships, and this will kind of round it out with a conversation of fiscal responsibility. We've been at this for a while, so our budget process is a lengthy one. It began in October, and on this slide at least, the items in yellow are things we've already completed. So the first formal presentation of a component of the budget was at our last meeting on January 10th, where we reviewed the administrative component of the budget, and also took a look at a budget forecast and a plan for use of reserves. Tonight we'll be, excuse me, tonight we'll be looking at, as I said, Program 1. What we mean by that is this is the general classroom components of the budget. So staff development, special education, school counselors, nurses, psychologists, social workers, those components of the budget that are not the general education component, but rather support that or provide services to students with special needs. It's up 1.5%. And as I mentioned, it includes those components of that budget. That's an $11 million budget, so up $176,000, just a bit over $176,000. There's really not a lot of change in this budget for this year. In the past, we've had significant changes, but for this year, there was during the course of this year, during the 15-16 year, a 0.4 of an FTE increase in high school special ed. And we transferred, again during this year, 1 clerical staff member from the high school office to the counseling office. So you saw that movement in the last budget where the administration budget went down in clerical. This is the opposite end of that, so the simple increase. Some shifts throughout the budget when you look in your detail, increases and decreases in supplies, contractual items as we realign and align those budget codes to make sure they make sense with what's going on in the buildings. But there's really no change in permanent mental health or counseling staff contained here. This shows of those various components broken up by area or by function, what the relative size of that budget. So of that $11 million budget, you can see certainly the vast majority of that is for students with disabilities, staff development, school counselors, health, psychs, school psychologists, and social workers. While they're important, or in terms of scale here, much less. Much smaller. When you can split it up, of course, a different way, and that is by what that $11 million supports. And here, this is no surprise to those of you who've seen this virtually in every presentation as we go through our budget. We're a people business, and that's certainly no different here. So the vast majority of this particular budget area is for salaries, and the vast majority of those salaries are salaries for certified staff, for teachers. Non-certified also, and tuitions for disabled and preschool students, or disabled students. So those are tuitions for out-of-district placements where it's required, where whatever their program is simply can't be met internally. So those special schools. The next component of that is the program review of this budget. You have a much more detailed line item budget in front of you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I just want to foreshadow where we're going. At the next meeting, we'll have a budget workshop. Prior to the start of the meeting, we'll review the capital portion of the budget, which includes buildings and grounds, transportation, debt service, and then we'll start and then we will review on the second meeting in February the remainder of the program budget. So that's all of regular school teaching as well as libraries, computer services, clubs, and sports. BOCES, March 14th, and by March 28th we're bringing this to an end. So we'll have the first initial review of the entire budget. We'll take a look at benefits and a revenue side of the budget in March, because in April the board needs to approve and adopt. The public hearings on May 16th, on May 2nd, I apologize, and we'll vote on May 16th at the high school from 6 to 9. Are there any questions? I know I went through that fairly quickly, but as I said, there weren't a lot of changes in this component for this year.
Board members, I know we had a substantial amount of information in the packet, so questions should be forthcoming. Lisa.
Hello. Do you have a percentage of salaries that supports like the RTI Gen Ed of those
I do
teachers?
not off the top of my head.
No, I was just curious, like, because I mean, I know from the elementary level, it's a good portion of the teachers, but I'm not sure what how that shakes out.
Right,
in
they're
other
included
areas.
here certainly because they're special education certified, but
Right.
obviously depending on, the needs of the building and where they're at, they may be providing RTI support or special education support. It really just depends. But I don't have that percentage.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, board members?
I'd like to talk a little bit about tax cap, if I could. I know it's everyone's favorite topic.
Yes, it
I
is.
don't like to let a meeting go by without some conversation about it.
No, that's a great idea, because under my remarks, I'll talk a little bit about the governor's budget.
Oh, that's a fine idea as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I just want, on our schedule, we update tax cap at this time because we've just gotten, as part of the governor's budget, a little bit more information. But mostly, the most important part for tonight is we now have a full year worth of inflation, so we know what our allowable levy growth would be. I just want to review a couple of the components that we've already talked about. So we previously looked at this component of the budget, which is the tax-based growth factor. In red is Penfield. The average is the line. The average for the county is the line across horizontally about in the middle. We grew This is the amount of growth in our community in terms of real brick and mortar. So new construction, not reassessments, not changes in valuation of existing property, but new brick and mortar. And it was about 0.5% for Penfield last year. So the minimum it can be is 1, and we are 1.0048. So it's been, as you'll recall, that's bounced around a lot for us last year. We were quite high last year. This year, not so. But that is a component of our tax cap, because in the calculation you're allowed to take credit, if you will, or the cap expands a bit to allow for any of those new properties. The other component, the important component that we didn't know until just this week, is the allowable levy growth factor, and this is where the 2% piece of this comes from. So as this board knows, that allowable levy growth is the lesser of the rate of inflation for the preceding 12 months or 2%, whichever's less. So the cap's designed over time always to trail the rate of inflation. In years when inflation is high and it's 3 or 4%, we'll use 2. In years when inflation is lower than 2, we'll use whatever it is. And for this year, for the 2017 calculation, we're going to use 1.26%. So inflation running at about 1.3%. In our estimates up to this point, and in our goals, assumptions, and guidelines document, I'd calculated an estimate based on flat 1%. So it's a little better than we'd estimated. This is what that looks like over time for us. And so you can see that tax-based growth factor, 12% last year, 0.5% this year. But last year, the offsetting variable was inflation was essentially flat, 0.1%. And so the allowable levy growth factor that we used was 0.12. This year, with inflation at 1.26, we'll use 1.26. Again, you use whatever it is until it hits 2, at which point it freezes. This is the simplified calculation for that. We begin with this year's levy. We're allowed, again, to increase it by that 0.48%, the 0.5% for new construction. We add in pilots, so these are payments in lieu of taxes, so the formula takes credit for that. Essentially, if you're going to get more in pilots, it reduces the amount that you can levy, and vice versa. So that change is calculated in here, and you include the 1.26% growth. Also for us is we carried over. We were not at the cap last year. We were underneath the cap by $200,000, so we're allowed to carry up to 1.5% over. That's well under the 1.5, but so we allowed to carry that over. You work all that through. There are no allowable exclusions for this year, and we end up at an allowable tax cap limit, so our levy can increase by just over 2%, 2.15%. To do yet, this is not quite final yet. I believe that this is where we'll settle, but we have to confirm our pilot agreements. They tend to change, and they can swing this pretty dramatically depending on what happens. There is some potential for that because for us, the hotel on Panorama Trail is a pilot project. It won't come onto the roll until it's completed. So we're at the point now where guessing the timing of that is becoming important. And we need to confirm and recalculate our capital exclusions. With the passage of or with the release of the governor's budget, we have some more information that we need to be able to do that, and it's just not done yet. So over the course of the next couple of meetings, we'll be doing that and coming back, but this is our guideline for now. We know, at least unless something changes, that about 2%, 2.15%, is truly our tax cap for this year. We don't know yet where we'll end up. We're still working on putting that budget together, but this is the 9-year history. Over the last 9 years, our levy increase percentage has been 1.8%. So the tax cap has been in existence itself for 5 years. This will be the 6th. So we were a 2% district before it was mandated. And I think that's important to remind the public as well. So there'll be more to come and lots more conversation about this, but I just wanted to remind the board where we were at, and we'll be coming back to this in future meetings as well.
Thank you, Mark. Question?
Real quick question. You happen to mention reviewing our pilot agreements.
Yes.
And the way you phrased it, these are not agreements we make. These are agreements that we have to live with.
Correct. We don't have a say in these. That's been the subject of lots of conversation across the county. Pilots are a relatively, they're important always. In terms of our budget, they're smaller. If we're not, the Henriettas, Rush Henrietta, for example, has significant impact by pilot agreement. But for us, what they are important. It's new construction that essentially is not reflected on the roll, because those pilot agreements in the first year is exempt up to 90% of the assessed value, and then it comes on over time. So, they're a function of the county's decision-making. We don't have a role in that, other than we're impacted by the decision.
Okay. Basically, the county informs us and delivers it to us, so, which is...
I get it in the mail.
Yeah. Right. Get it in the mail. So, now, Mark, that other office park across from the hotel, is that in East Rochester then, the one that's going up, like, just across the street?
I believe that is in the hotel. I believe that is in East Rochester.
A very big office park going up if you've gone by there, so. Any other questions for Mark on this? I think the key thing to keep in mind, particularly for our viewers at home, that, going back to that slide over the last 10 years, if we could put that, I mean, I don't know anybody that could run a business or even the federal government with that type of a rate. So I think that's a credit to the previous boards, and this board tries to carry that on. So thanks again, Mark.
All right. Just a brief update on our 2018 elementary additions project. All information that will continue to keep updated can be found on the district website, penfield.edu, underneath the tab on the top, News and Information, and the very first drop-down is called 2018 Elementary Additions Project, so anybody in the community can go and take a look. That includes all of the site plans as of right now. It also includes any of the presentations and community forums we have. We videotape those, and they'll go up there. So our last one on January 18th is up, and people can go and view that. The article in the January Prestige, our district newsletter, outlines everything that's also on that webpage, but it's a great piece of information for our community to look at. And just an update from since our last meeting is myself and Alan McNiff, our Director of Facilities, and Nancy Bradstreet. Dr. Sansucci wasn't there. He wanted to be there. I sent him home because he was sick, and so he needed to get better. I'm glad he did. But we met with the neighbors that are directly related to the property we own on Atlantic Avenue, where we're proposing to build the buildings and grounds site for B&G and maintenance. And we met with them. It was a very informal meeting, focused only really on that property, but Alan brought large maps. We sat around a table and we went through the project and answered all the questions that they had. I've been in contact via phone with a couple of the residents with some basic questions. And what we've said is, obviously change is tough, and we understand, but it's also we want to be good neighbors. We want to listen to concerns and make sure we can work with our neighborhood residents any way we can. And I would say it was a very cordial meeting, and appreciated everybody coming out and asking great questions. We followed that up the following week, last week on January 18th with a larger public information meeting that anybody could come to. And I know several board members were able to be there, and you can watch it online. Again, we presented there. Alan McNiff did a wonderful job presenting each site map and really explaining the whys for what's on the map, especially when we talk about not just classroom space at the elementary schools, but redesigning bus loops, parent pickup and drop off. If you have an elementary child, that is always a difficult situation with our current setup for parent pickup and drop off. And so looking at the capital project and walking through that. And then we took questions and answers, and some great questions that are online that you can look at. And also after, at the end of the meeting, we had the site map for each of the locations up on easels, and people could go over and talk to the principal of the elementary school that where changes are being proposed, talk to Alan, talk to Dr. Sansucci, myself, and board members. And again, I think very cordial, very respectful, and great questions from the community. So that's just the beginning. We have to now continue to further define the scope and budget. Facilities Committee meets on that, as well as meeting with our architects and our principals to determine really what is fully needed, and then the budget. You know, we're dealing with estimates right now, and between now and our next meeting in June, our next public meeting, we need to continue to sort of refine exactly the scope and the budget. We have to prepare necessary documents for the review process. That it means at the last board meeting, the board approved a traffic study as well as environmental impact, and we'll be taking a look at all those documents. And then our next meeting is in June 2017, which is just in a couple of months. Our public information meeting, again, to bring people back, and more information, specific dates will come out about that. So our tentative timeline is just another public information in June, followed by our third public information meeting in September. I just want to point out, we purposely didn't choose a summertime date. It would make sense timeline-wise to meet in July and August, but ultimately we know that's a time for travel. People aren't necessarily paying attention to the school news as much, and we purposely trying to be as open and transparent as we can, want to make sure we avoided summertime months. So another meeting in June, another public meeting in September, and then during that June to October time period, because we know the board continues to work throughout the summer as well as staff, we'll be bringing everything to the board so they can consider all the public comments. And then in October, the board will make a determination of significance, really taking a look at the seeker process and determine if we're ready to move forward. And if so, then a vote date would be scheduled in October. And we're tentatively looking at the vote for this capital project for December of this year, December 2017. But especially for the public viewing, there's still questions we're working towards. We're still taking any questions people have. We mentioned at the January 18th meeting, if anybody has a question, they can call me directly. They can email Nancy Bradstreet. They can go to the webpage. We have our contact us link, and they can send in a question, and we'll answer all of them that come through. And that is the end of my presentation on just an update on the capital project process.
Okay, that was a good turnout. And, I know we had a question there about the December vote, and he answered it pretty well, but I wish I could have mentioned, Mark would remember this, but at one time, former Superintendent John Carlovati and I went to Albany to the education department to literally walk through a blueprint, because it had just been, I can't remember what, it was a while ago, but I can't remember what project, but it would just, you were driving them, to an answer, and they weren't responding because they were starting those layoffs. And we had a great meeting, and, it went from this pile where it was going to go to this pile. So time is of the essence when you do these type of programs, and sometimes, if we have to walk through again, I'll show you how to do that.
Actually, if you remember in Albany,
that's
Carolyn
right.
and I
You
sort
did
of
that. Right.
found our way into the office to speak to some people, and
Yes.
that helped as well. So,
Yeah, I think we actually talked to Carl, which there was nobody else around. I hope it was lunch hour, but it was. So that's why we have to move things as quickly as possible, because we have no control once it goes there. And but except with our legislators, so we can always contact them. And I did want to note at a recent meeting I had through my Monroe County School Board Association with one of our regents, Andrew Brown, he did mention, because I asked him about that, he said, you know, he's vice chair of the regents, and he said, if you have any issues with anything like that, let me know. So I'm not one to forget that. So again, I think it was great that he would mention that, and it doesn't hurt to have those type of contacts, so. Thanks again. We're on page 2 of our agenda. Under board business, we have financial items, donations and book fair proceeds. We had donations and book fair proceeds totaling $16,128.23 for the 2016-17 budget was received as shown in our program. And these come as a result of a lot of what our schools are doing. Cobbles Elementary had a book fair proceeds, Harris Hill Book Fair, Scrivener Book Fair, Bay Trail Book Fair, Cobbles Elementary, AIE and field trips. The high school was the RIT Technology Award, Harris Hill Elementary Arts and Education. So, you know, these are great things, and if, you know, certainly that our PTAs help with immensely as well. So if I could have a motion second that the Board of Education approve an amendment totaling $16,128.23 to the 2016-17 budget as shown above, the amount submitted both as revenue and expenditure items, and express its gratitude to the donors for their generous support of Penfield schools and all Penfield parents, students, and staff for their support of this year's book fairs.
So moved.
Any questions, comments? All those in favor? Thank you. We have a first reading under policy review, 5345, use of district cell phone. Camille, your turn.
Sure. This policy is being updated. It's a good example of a policy that's probably being updated to more reflect what the current practice is in the district. And so we're just striking one sentence that didn't really fit anymore.
Okay. So kind of a quiet time for the policy committee.
No, we're working really hard. It's just we only have this one for
Okay,
first-
good.
next
good.
time.
We'll be
probably
looking
next
forward
meeting,
to.
Or we'll
Great.
have more
Great.
for first read.
And we appreciate all the work. Okay. Under President's remarks, board candidates. It's that time of year. The terms of Board of Education members, Mrs. Lisa Benatti-Chidsey and Mrs. Camille Rutan, will expire June 30th, 2017. The term of office for a board member is 3 years. Petitions may be obtained at the district office beginning on February 27th, 2017. 26 signatures of qualified voters are needed on the petition, which must be filed with the clerk no later than April 17th, 2017. Candidates should supply their personal biographical data and statement of qualifications and issues to the district clerk by April 10th, 2017 to meet the printing deadline for the budget newsletter. The annual Monroe County School Boards Association Prospective School Board Candidate Seminar has been scheduled for Saturday, March 18th, 2017 at the Lexington Hotel, which is located by the airport, and our Meet the Candidate night will be yet to be determined. So the Monroe County School Board Association Prospective School Board Candidate Seminar is an excellent, excellent program. In fact, I'll be opening it this year as president, but we're also looking at next year and making some changes to that. We're constantly looking at it to, you know, keep it modern and applicable for candidates. So that will be happening. Under unfinished business, on our Board of Education strategic plan, just wanted to look at a couple of these pieces. Under Priority 1 visibility, I think it's pretty much been accomplished, particularly in regard to Facebook and getting more advance notice from the schools. Priority number 2, I know I just saw an email out there about review and recommend changes for the Board of Education member orientation process for Penfield and the handbook. So I know, Lisa, you sent that out, Lisa, correct? So I think I had given Camille a packet way back that was either Brighton or Pittsford or something. Did I give you that?
Yes, you did. We
Okay,
have some
good.
examples of other districts'
Great.
manuals. Am I the only one who has a copy of that? I will share that.
Sharon got me the slides for the
from the seminar we had, yeah. And I did bring this up and ask at the board president's dinner last week, and it really runs the gamut. I mean, you've got some that are hundreds of pages, and some that are literally, oh, we just have them meet with our staff. So certainly we do more than that, so it'd be great to have something a little more formalized. I think we have met some of the items on priority 2. Priority 3, legislative advocacy. You had a second meeting, Catherine and Mark, okay. And that's moving along as far as, okay.
Yes. I think we're going to have another meeting. It's tentative for February 16th. So
Okay.
I just,
We're waiting on one more
Okay.
confirmation.
okay, so, we're shooting for that.
Great, okay. And our last priority, we've had some presentations underway, obviously, as we saw tonight. We have the Community Drug Forum as far as conversations on education. We'll likely have something relating to the budget, probably, or similar to that. The last 2, conduct a Board of Education self-evaluation. I've scheduled that for May. We'll be using the same format, the electronic format from the New York State School Boards Association that we used last year. And we'll do a better job of putting our goals and objectives in there so it's more defined than we did it last year. And then the staff, as I mentioned, Sherry Johnson will be facilitating our strategic planning session with staff that Tom selects to be there, our administrators, I believe, district office administrators, and the board. So we'll be sending out a, what do we call it?
A doodle.
Doodle. A doodle. Maybe you didn't know that, but you'll be sending out a doodle.
Surprise, Sharon, you'll be sending out a doodle, and Jim, Mark, and Barb, surprised you'll be attending a training. Okay.
Well, you're invited to come to this, and we decided,
Doodling?
and this will be held somewhere in the district, on district property, so it can be affordable and convenient. And as you know, Sherry is the executive director of the Monroe County School Boards Association and has worked with other groups and is currently working with the City of Rochester School District, so that'll be a great program. Okay, just as I
John,
mentioned.
I had a question.
I'm sorry, go
about-
ahead.
You mentioned conversation on education, and we already had one. Is the screening of screenagers also going to be billed as a conversation on education, or is that just another opportunity?
It would, in terms of, I don't think we build it as a conversation on education in terms of the branding, but February 8th is February 8th? I think February 8th is going to be the date for screenagers. Information's coming out about that, but that is in partnership with PAB, the Parent Advisory Board, and the district partner together. We are working on and finalizing a panel, so it will be a conversation similar to the forum we did on drugs, in the sense that people can ask questions in writing, and then we'll have some facilitators asking the panel those questions. So it sort of falls under our terms of we've always worked over at least the last few years in terms of having a conversation in education when there wasn't anything necessarily major in the budget to talk about. But we've been having these sort of partnering with the community and having these outreach programs, including, around suicide discussion, drugs, racism, and now screenagers, which is the next piece around sort of the use of screen time, especially on our youth and adolescents. So we're going to continue to focus on those pieces to bring the community in.
Thanks for mentioning that, Camille. That's going to be great to see as well. So, as promised, I'm going to try and give updates as the budget process goes along. I kind of am in the loop a little more as president of Monroe County School Board Association, but there's been comments in regard to the budget. Obviously, none of them from our side of the industry have been, very pro, but I know Michael Borges, who's the executive director of the New York State Association of School Business Officials, of which Mark belongs to, his quote was, that the governor basically threw gasoline on the fire and created a storm over something that could have been avoided. And it's all about foundation aid. And the governor's budget, which he released, eliminated the phase-in of the formula, which if fully run would have given an additional $4.3 billion to districts statewide. The governor's proposing a $1 billion increase. The governor's budget division spokesman said the formula itself has not been eliminated, but the proposed changes will lower the levels of poverty and update census data, both progressive measures that will direct more funding to high-needs districts. The administration does dispute the amount owed to the districts, which we know what ours is exactly to the cent, pointing out how much aid the governor continues to budget for education. So, no, this could be a sticking point in budget negotiations. There's a surprise for everybody. Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie, who is a friend of our education, believes there's some back money that still should be put towards education, and foundation aid and the numbers pertaining to foundation aid are important, and we'd like to see that happen. There are too many communities around the state where there's just not enough funding for these school districts. So the fun has begun, and as you know, there's probably 26 days when the legislature will meet from now to the end of June, believe it or not. So we have to continue to focus on what's important to us, and I know we're all involved with that. Yes, Catherine.
Add to this, because I was watching the news right before we came out tonight, and there was a story on the budget, specifically the free tuition at SUNY. And somebody asked the question, where would that money come from? And he says the money will come out of education. That was his answer. So whatever that means. And he thinks in the whole scheme of the budget, $163 million is not a lot of money for this free tuition that's going to come out of education money.
So if I could weigh in with just a little bit of the technical aspect of that too. So as a board, you had a presentation, we talked about this, and so I think you're in good place to have the conversation to understand what's going on. What he eliminated was that foundation aid amount, the fixed dollar amount that you'll recall is the basis for that formula. It was based on the cost in New York of a successful school. You can quibble with the amount, but it was established and it's part of that formula. The governor would prefer to eliminate that, and essentially what he does is then turn the formula into, well, it doesn't depend on anything, other than what you got last year. It's sort of, we'll take away that component that is sort of a guiding star for what is the formula ought to distribute, and we'll just base everything in the future on incrementally what it was last year. That takes away obviously the conversation about what's an adequate level of funding for education. It sort of sweeps that under the rug. And there are two outstanding lawsuits right now for the poorer school, the city schools and the poorer schools that are based on that. So I think certainly it's going to it's going to play out in court as well as playing out in the legislature. So I think it's interesting. The updated formula components are overdue. That's fine, but essentially so he updated it and then gutted the formula with the other hand. So it's pretty interesting.
And the legislators that we interact with, the biggest issue they have is the governor puts this all in his budget proposal rather than having it separate so there can be legitimate debate away from the budget. So this has been the problem as time goes on. So the last item I'd like to mention, thank you, Mark, is on behalf of the Monroe County School Boards Association, Sherry Johnson and myself sent a letter and with the officer's approval to Senator Charles Schumer and Kristen Gillibrand, expressing the fact that we do not believe that Betsy DeVos would make a good candidate for the Secretary of Education. When we looked back, and anybody can look back at the history of those secretaries, there at least some connection or a background in education. And this didn't come lightly, but there's just too much there that's not there. And so this was an important letter we sent. We hope to get a response from the senators And Senator Schumer has been a little bit on the edge of this, talking about it. And, you know, everything we stand for in public education does not seem to be what that candidate for that position stands for. So we had to take a stand on that. So we sent that out this week. Yes, Barb?
Just prior to me coming to the meeting, there was a message from Kristen Gillibrand saying that she would not be supporting Betsy DeVos.
Good, great.
So at least she is acknowledging.
She got my letter. No.
Tell John.
This is, I'd say, of all the candidates, and I mean, you know, there's a lot of educated people there, but this candidate in particular just seems to not have the qualifications and the support of people that are in our industry, I would say, and the experts. So thank you for that, Barb. If there's no other questions, I would look for a motion to adjourn at 8:30 p.m. All those in favor? Thank you.